Welcome to this week's edition of The Heart of the Mule, presented by Taylor Industries. I'm sitting here with FCA President Brad Banowetz. And Brad, thanks for taking the time to join us today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's kind of go ahead and get started here with the faith side of things, and just kind of explain a little bit how you came to have your relationship with Christ.
Well, it's kind of funny. I describe it as like I came to Christ out of sheer terror. If you've ever seen the movie Left Behind, it's basically like a movie about the end times where all the Christians just like, they vanish. And I was watching this when I was probably like 9 years old with my parents. And they got to the point where all the people just like vanished. And I was like, man, what happened? And my parents kind of explained the situation about, at the end times, like Christ comes back and takes the Christians into heaven. And I was like, man, I don't want to be left behind. I was terrified. And so my parents, they were like reassuring me. They're like, Brad, it's okay. You just have to like pray this prayer and, God's going to save you kind of thing. I was like, okay, cool. And of course, that's when I was 9. And so I guess I described that as like my starting point of my relationship with Christ. And then like through the years, I've definitely learned more about what it's like to walk with Christ and have that relationship with Him, where it's like a day in and day out choice that I make to follow Christ and choose to be that example to like bring the light to the world here. And so that's kind of how like I came to faith. Like I always grew up in a Christian household, and so I just kind of like started learning that process and accepted God as my Lord and Savior at that point, and just kind of been walking in that faith ever since.
Yeah, and you kind of mentioned a little bit, just kind of the impact that your parents, Kevin and Julie, had on you as far as your faith. Growing up in that Christian household, was the example that they set for you, did it really kind of, really make you understand more about Christ and how his relationship, how your relationship with Him can really enhance your life?
Yeah, it really did. Like my parents, they were obviously like they were real intentional about having me go to Sunday school and like learning the Jesus stories and stuff like that. But I think one of the big things that they did is that they were able to show a lot of love to myself and my siblings, which kind of sets the example of like how God loves us. And so they were able to share that like in their parenting, I guess. And so, yeah, that was really good. They were definitely very influential with helping me learn about my faith. And I think another thing my parents did as I got older, like they never forced this thing called faith on me. Mm-hmm. When I got into high school, I remember distinctly my mom coming to me and being like, hey, Brad, you don't have to go to church anymore if you don't want to. Because at that point, like I was kind of frustrated with everything. Like I didn't enjoy church a whole lot. And so she was just real honest. She was like, Brad, I'm not going to force you to do this. This is your choice. If you want to continue to follow Christ, then go for it. But I'm not going to drag you along if you don't want to. And I think that was a big thing for me because at that point I realized that this is something that I had to commit to, that no longer it wasn't just my parents trying to force me to do it, but it was something where like I had to take this relationship with Christ as my own and to walk in that.
Just kind of talk about, first coming onto campus as a freshman in 2011 and, how you first got involved with FCA here at UCM.
Well, I had been in FCA in high school, and so coming to UCM, I was excited to find out if FCA was here. And thankfully, I met one of the girls named Jenna, who was a huddle leader at FCA at the time, and she told me about FCA here at UCM and got me involved with it and told me a little bit about it and stuff. And so, yeah, I had known about FCA for a while now, and so I had the intent of getting involved already. And so I guess I got involved because of another track athlete who invited me and kind of showed me how things worked here at UCM.
Obviously now you're the president of FCA, and you really kind of have taken that leadership role very seriously from what I've understood. And just kind of talk about the process of being elected as FCA president and kind of what that responsibility means to you.
Yeah, of course. Well, FCA to me it's a very unique ministry. We focus a lot on impacting the world through Jesus Christ through the athletes and coaches here on campus. And so that's special to me because it's different than another ministry where it's just a broad spectrum of people, whereas like here our focus is definitely on the athletes and the coaches in this campus and in this community. And so my responsibility, I feel as if, is to help athletes understand like what this idea of competing as a Christian athlete means to them, and like how they can figure it out and how that works. Because I think a lot of times what athletes have a hard time understanding is like, how can they have a faith in Christ but also compete at the same time? And so often we try to separate the two, and we have our sports life and then we have our faith life. And I think at FCA we try to bridge those two things together and say, hey, it doesn't have to be separate, but you can bring them together and worship Christ through your sport. And so I've taken a responsibility with that just because it's helped me out a lot with my relationship with Christ. And so I want to encourage people to continue to pursue that for themselves.
And you just kind of mentioned it a little bit, but I just want you to go a little bit more in depth on your personal experiences with having to balance not only your spiritual training through FCA and going to church and all of that, but also, not only the full load of classes here in college, but also you're an athlete as well. And so, just kind of talk about how, through the power of Christ, you were able to really balance all those things out exceptionally well.
Well, it's tough, just to be honest. I'll lay it out there. It's hard to balance it. And I think for me, kind of like what I was talking before, when you balance something, it almost means to like put things on two separate scales. And I really tried to avoid looking at it in that way, where it's like had my spiritual life over here and my athletic life over here, and like trying to make sure it evened out. And so instead of looking in that respect, I try to bridge the two and say, okay, how can I bring my spirituality into my sports or into my academics? And so I didn't have that conflicting like feeling anymore when they were separated, like they were together. And so I guess, for example, like when competing, I would view it as like a form of worship. Just like people go to church and they sing songs, like they think that's worship. And a lot of times we can get confused because we think that's the only way we can worship. But I think the reality is that God can accept our worship in any kind of means, whether it's like an interview like this, or whether it's an athlete competing, or whether it's like a chef cooking. Like all those can be forms of worship. And so I guess for me, it was about understanding how I could bring those two together and worship God through my academics and through my sports.
What's the greatest benefit that you get from your relationship with Christ?
Freedom, I think. A lot of times people look at a relationship with Christ as something that's burdensome. They look at Christianity as just like a book of rules. They look at the Bible and it's like, this is just a bunch of things that tells me what I can't do in life. And for me, it's more of something that sets me free. Like I know that there's truth in this, and that a life lived the way that Christ recommends us to live is something that's it's something that's like special, and it's something that's like it frees you of the burdens of like the world. And so I think that's the major benefit. I mean, that's kind of a churchy answer too. Mm-hmm. But I think if we kind of step away from like the biblical church answer, I think some other benefits would just be like having community of people who understand you and who can be there with you like through your struggles and through your successes in life. At FCA, we definitely try to like build that community of people, and having that community that's based on the Bible, we can like come together and like work on the struggles and be thankful for those successes together. So yeah, it brings that community of people together, and that's something that's not like the churchy answer either, but it's just something practical. And
finally, just to wrap up this faith side of the segment, before we got on camera, I told you to make sure to have your favorite verse or verses picked out from the Bible. So go ahead and tell us what verse. It looks like you got two there that you got marked. Just one?
Yeah.
Just go ahead and tell us which one it is and go ahead and read it, and then just briefly explain what it kind of means to you.
Yeah, for sure. My favorite verse is Romans 12, verses 1 and 2. So it says, "Therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, I urge you to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this age, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may discern what is the good, pleasing, and perfect will of God." And to me, that just talks about like verse 2, saying like, do not be conformed to this age. It's saying like, don't allow yourselves to be tempted by the worldly things, like all the flashy lights and things like that, all the glam and fame, and like those things are all fun in the short time, but in the long time, like they don't have any meaning. And so to me, this is saying like, don't be conformed to that. Like, don't allow those things to change you, but instead be transformed by the renewing of your mind, which means that like by having that relationship with Christ, by diving into the Word, by being surrounded by a community of Jesus followers, that will like change our minds so that we can live the life that Christ calls us to live. And so to me, it's just awesome to kind of to have that encouragement where it's like encouraging me to be transformed by this and not be transformed by the world. And then I guess the other part to this is going back to verse 1. It talks about to present your bodies as a living sacrifice. And this helped me out a lot with track and with my athletic career, because as I was talking about earlier, when I was saying about combining your faith and your sport together, this verse kind of like opened me up to that, because a living sacrifice is something that like I'm a living being, I'm a person, and I can use my abilities to like worship God. And so that living sacrifice is kind of explaining that idea of worshiping God through my sport or my academics. And so that's why I think that is super cool, because it's just like it really just opened my mind to this idea of combining the two together, and it released me from that burden of like trying to balance the two, because I no longer had to do that, but they were combined, and I was like, wow, this is awesome. Mm-hmm. And so that's why these two verses are my favorite, because they've really encouraged me in my growth, especially through college. And I always turn to these when I'm trying to like encourage people to do the same. So yeah, they've made a huge impact on me.
And when we come back, we'll have more with Brad Banowetz, the track athlete that we have here. So don't go away. Stick around. More Heart of the Mule right after this.
I choose excitement.
I choose to make a difference.
I choose uncommon opportunities.
I choose red to experience learning to a greater degree.
Choose red. Choose the University of Central Missouri.
Welcome to Taylor Tidbits here, presented by Taylor Industries. I'm sitting alongside here with founder and CEO of Taylor Industries, Mike Ballard. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Good to be here.
Absolutely. And go ahead and just tell us a little bit about what Taylor Industries is and what kind of services and products you provide.
Taylor Industries is a manufacturer of medical products. Our main thing that we do here in this facility is ECG electrodes, which are used to monitor your heartbeat. If you're ever in a hospital, or say they do a stress test on you on a treadmill, they're going to have them on you to monitor your heart. We also manufacture TENS electrodes for nerve stimulating, and we custom build machinery to do different things.
This is Mike Ballard, the founder and CEO of Taylor Industries. This has been Taylor Tidbits.
Look around you. 1 in 4 kids in the U.S. faces hunger. It's not always easy to see the signs, but in this land of plenty, there are kids that don't know where they will get their next meal. Join Share Our Strength in Food Network and take the pledge to end childhood hunger here in America by 2015. Learn how at NoKidHungry.org. Their next meal could come from you.
And welcome back to this week's edition of the Heart of the Mule. Again, sitting here with Brad Banowetz, former Mules track runner and now FCA president. And And Brad, we've gone through the faith side of things, so now let's kind of talk about your athletic career. Originally from O'Fallon, Missouri, so you're from the St. Louis area,
right?
Fort Zumwalt North, Panthers.
Yep.
Just talk about Brad Banowetz, the high school student, a little bit.
The high school student. Well, obviously athletics was a big part of my high school career. Track athlete all 4 years, basketball as well. Track was definitely my main sport, obvious since I came to school to run track. So I was real involved with our athletic side. As a senior of high school, I made the commitment that I wanted to run track in college, and so that kind of started my search for schools and led me here to UCM.
In 2010 at the state meet, you took 10th in the 300-meter hurdle, and that was kind of your first test of, really kind of, performing at a high level on a big stage. So just kind of talk about that meet and kind of what you remember from your performance.
I remember being super nervous, in all honesty, and I was so nervous that I think I spent like an hour and a half warming up. And this was like a 89-degree day, so it was hot in Missouri, and so by no means I could have warmed up in like 5 minutes. And so I think that was like kind of a test, and I think I might have failed that time too. But it was good because it kind of helped me get ready for the next stage, which is like collegiate athletics. And so just being able to recognize that, hey, like, let the nerves calm down. It's just another way to compete. It was a good lesson learned, and it helped me in my college career.
Well, and kind of just talking a little bit about, the collegiate side of the running. In 2011, you qualified for the Kansas Relays, and where, that's a big event where, there's not only, countless great track athletes on the collegiate level that are at the tournament, so you can kind of get a sense of, how they train and prepare, but also there's a lot of the top high school athletes that end up becoming, collegiate track athletes like yourself. Just kind of talk about that experience and how that was really able to kind of be an eye-opener for you, as you made the transition to college.
Yeah, that was a really cool meet because, as you said, there's a lot of top-notch high school athletes there. And so it's cool to get out of your regular area of competition and go someplace where it's like, these people are good, and it really pushes you. And it, like for me, it made me, or it encouraged me to really like take the competition seriously, and it pushed me to perform better. But then also there was the college athletes there, and then the recruiters, and so that was cool to see because it like encouraged me to continue to do college athletics, because I could see, hey, like these guys are having fun, like they're pursuing their passion and they're really good at it, and it's like that's something that I want to do. And so it kind of like solidified that goal in my mind where it's like, yeah, college athletics is something I want to do.
Kind of a little bit mention, kind of the impact that Coach Kip really has had on your athletic career here at UCM.
Yeah, Kip's been awesome as a coach, and the thing I like about him is that he like puts a lot of responsibility on us as athletes. Track's an interesting sport because it's not like a team sport like basketball. But it's kind of an individual team sport where it's like, if we don't want to put in the work, it's going to show in our races, and like it's up to us to keep pushing ourselves. Obviously, when we get to the conference meet, it becomes a team sport where we have to work together to score points to win as a team. But yeah, Kip was definitely real influential in telling us that like this is our responsibility. If we want to get better, like we have to push ourselves.
Fall of 2011, so your first semester here on campus. Just talk a little bit about how, as a track athlete, in high school that you were, coming here and having to not only do the outdoor track, but also indoor track, because I know, obviously the track's a lot smaller in indoor, so it's a little bit harder to get adjusted. Just talk about that transition of, did you have any indoor experience before you came to school here? And if you didn't, how much of a transition period did you really have getting used to the track on the indoor?
Yeah, I didn't have any indoor experience prior to college. I didn't have the opportunity to run anywhere indoors, but I think the biggest transition was just going from high school, where our season is so short in the spring, to coming to college, and we start preseason in September. And so we're training from September to January, and we're not competing or anything. We're just like training and pushing through the grind. And then we have 2 seasons all the way from January to May. And so I think that was the biggest transition, was like No longer was I just an athlete in one season like I was in high school, but now, my athletic season is basically the entire year. And so that was a big change, but definitely very, very good. I enjoyed having the ability to run throughout the year.
Your first outdoor season was really kind of cut short. You ended up redshirting because you had a little bit of a torn labrum there. Just kind of talk about facing the adversity of coming off of your first injury at the college level.
Yeah, that was tough. I wasn't expecting to have an injury. Nobody does. And so it was a surprise and kind of a disappointment because I was like, man, I really wanted just to run and to train and to work hard, and now my body's not working how it's supposed to. I'm like, this is dumb. And so it was just about like recognizing that my first priority was getting healthy. And then I could focus on like getting back into training again. And so I think the team was just real helpful during that time in my life where they were supportive of me and they knew what I was going through and that they were willing to like help me out. And so the adversity that I faced was definitely lessened due to the help of my teammates.
Yeah, and again, obviously you're talking about how you were really able to kind of heal through that process. And again, coming into that next season, 2012 in the fall, you end up redshirting again on the indoor side of things, so you can kind of balance out between the two. And then in the outdoor season, in your sophomore year, you finished second at the 400-meter hurdles at the Wildcat Open. That was a big step for you there. And then you take 16th at the MIAA championships, also in the 400-meter as well. So you really were able to come off of that injury, and it really started building up the blocks of you kind of getting better as a collegiate athlete.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was good to get out there and run like that outdoor season. Because I was excited to do the 400 hurdles, obviously coming from high school, the 300 hurdles, progressing into the 400 hurdles in college, and being disappointed that I couldn't run the 400 hurdles my freshman year. So I was just really excited to get out there on the track and try that event out. And so yeah, I was happy about my successes that I had through that first season of running the 400 hurdles and like trying to figure out that race because it's a lot different than the 300 hurdles. So yeah, I was just happy to get out there and to work on it. And I was encouraged just to continue to work harder and get ready for the next season.
Yeah, and just kind of speaking to that next season, it's the first one that you were able to do both indoor and outdoor together.
Right.
So you had gone through so much as far as coming off of an injury like you had, and it really kind of set you back a little bit from trying to do both. And you just in the indoor MIAA championships, you take 11th in the 60-meter hurdles. Was that a big step for you as far as, especially on the indoor side of things, where you were really able to compete and finish at a high level?
Yeah, it was just nice to continue to get out there, continue to work at it. Obviously, the 60-meter hurdles is not like my race, but it's good to run it and to work on that event. And
then in outdoor season that year, you set a couple PRs. You set one in the 110-meter and then the 400-meter. You set those both at the Pitt State Gorilla Invitation. Just talk about that meet and just was it something you ate? Did you have your Wheaties for breakfast, or was it just all your training that you had done over the years?
I think it was probably just a progression of the training, like coming together and finally building up. Like that outdoor season, I had been working on the hurdles a lot more, and I felt like I was finally like getting it. Like I was getting my steps down. It was like finally coming together. Whereas the last season, it was like things were still kind of like messing up a little bit. And so this was like the first time like I felt good. Like things were working, practices were going good, and I think those races I just felt smooth. Like whenever you get done with a race and you're tired, obviously, but you're just like relaxed while you're running too, it usually means you did well. And so yeah, I think that's kind of what happened. I could have had some Wheaties for breakfast as well, which definitely helped. But yeah, I think it was mainly just the hard work and continuing to work hard leading up to that event that really helped out.
And then kind of just to end, everything, obviously you just alluded to how you started really building up momentum, and then you were faced with more adversity where you ended up having another injury. You ended up breaking your ankle, and obviously as a runner, that's got to be something very tough to try to come back from. So just kind of talk about how that injury happened and kind of your decision process of your future after track.
Yeah, for sure. It was just, I was running the 400 hurdles, and I don't really know what happened, to be honest. I mean, it's just like running like normal. Nothing was really different. I was just coming around the second corner and just didn't go over the hurdle like entirely correctly, but most of the time that's not an issue. You just keep running and you push through it. But this time, I just landed on my foot wrong and completely twisted over my ankle, and ended up like pulling the bone off and everything too. And at that immediate point, like when I did that, I like, okay, let's just keep running. I got this. But then I took a couple steps and was like, this ain't gonna work.
No.
And so I had to step off the track, and I think it was just like realizing that like this probably isn't very good. It's like, what's gonna happen here? And so that, or I guess what followed that was just like a couple months of like physical therapy and like trying to get back to health and stuff, because obviously it's like you want to correct those kind of injuries the best you can, because if you don't take the necessary steps, things aren't ever going to get better. And so I just had to deal with the disappointment of not being able to run at conference anymore, because like I said, I had already been doing fairly well with that season, and so that just kind of shattered that a little bit, and so I was no longer able to run anymore, obviously. And so now my goal just became getting better. And so with regard to like track after that, I went through some other decisions and like trying to decide with schooling and things like that. And basically what it came down to is that I decided I'd be done with track. That would be my last season. I wanted to pursue other things, other goals and ambitions that I had. And I felt like this would be a good chance to do that. And it wasn't anything like, I love track still. Definitely, it was still a passion of mine. It was just like the time was right, and there was opportunities for me to pursue other things like running for student body president, and that had been a goal of mine. And so I felt like using this as a chance to be like, okay, Brad, maybe it's time to move on. Let's go do something else. That's kind of how I worked through that process.
Sure. And now you're set to graduate pretty quickly. You're double major economics and finance here. You were summa cum laude when you graduated from high school, and you've been on the MIAA academic honor roll here as an athlete, and so obviously you've taken your academic side very seriously over the years. What is your ultimate goal to do with your degree, and what kind of career field, obviously in financial, but what exactly do you really want to do with your degree?
That's tough. Something I've struggled with a lot is like trying to figure out like where God's calling me in life, kind of thing. I have a lot of things I'd like to do. Be the president of the United States one day, maybe 2028.
There you
I think
go.
that is.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But I mean, I have a lot of passions that I like to pursue, whether that be like maybe working with FCA for a couple years afterwards, or maybe starting a nonprofit. I have a dream of like maybe working in third world countries and like creating sustainable businesses there where they can create products to sell for themselves and support themselves. And so that's something that I could definitely use my business background to pursue. So yeah, I think it's just a lot of little things that I could potentially do with it. Just like any other college kid, I'm still trying to work it out.
All right. And again, sitting here with Brad Banowetz, FCA president. Brad, thanks for taking the time to join us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And that will conclude this edition of The Heart of the Mule presented by Taylor Industries. I'm Jason Ketz. We'll see you next week.